I and other people. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not the only person who's been noticing the identity politics that's completely corrupted the university, that has completely poisoned the pursuit of knowledge and the passing on of the civilizational inheritance that is our privilege to be the recipients of. People like myself have been talking about this since the 1990s, 1980s, the rise of multiculturalism, of feminism in academic departments, the idea that students should be taught to evaluate a book based solely on the gonads and melanin of its author, giving them an excuse, oh, I don't have to struggle with Milton's syntax because he's a dead white male, thereby shutting myself off from some of the most rich verse in the English language, some of the most languorous, erotic, overripe poetry of descriptions of paradise and the natural bounty there and the fruitfulness of this place. But why should I read it? Because it's a dead white male. And that poison that first took down the loving, grateful study of the humanities, spread into the social sciences, was obvious it was not going to stay put. It was obvious. Even in the 90s, I mean, I had a cover story in the New Republic when Andrew Sullivan was the editor there, and so it was still, taking a range of opinion on the rise of corporate diversity training. This was happening all the way back in the 90s. I remember this huckster, R. Roosevelt Thomas, would go around to corporations saying, now, don't insist on promptness because that's a white value. There's black time. This was in the 90s. Now everybody's so surprised when they're hearing it out of the Smithsonian's, African American History Museum. And somehow, people just didn't pay attention. You have every CEO in this planet now that's terrified of his employees because they all come bearing this academic fever, this virus of oppression ideology, and they're going around saying that they're, the New York Times reporters, black reporters are at risk of their lives because the op-ed page publishes an op-ed by Senator Tom Cotton calling for a national federal law enforcement response to the riots that were tearing apart federal property, courthouses, and monuments. And somehow this op-ed put the lives of the Times' black opinion editors at risk, and so the opinion editor was fired. I mean, this is the pure academic whining and narcissism and safetyism and self-pity that is transforming corporation after corporation. So I saw it, but other people saw it too. You have Roger Kimball. He's one of the great writers for Epoch Times. He's been warning about this since the 90s. And I don't know why Americans didn't pay attention. I have to say, I told you so. And whether it's because we're not that intellectual a country, and so if you tell Americans that, well, they're not reading William Wordsworth any longer, or Shakespeare, or Anthony Trollope, or Edith Wharton, or Mark Twain, or Max Beerbohm, maybe they don't care that much. I don't know. They should care. They should care now. Now this infection is coming for classical music. They should care that Mozart is now being demeaned and impugned and belittled because he's a dead white male. I mean, this is heartbreaking. Or they just thought it didn't matter, but it matters. I mean, I guess what I've learned is there's almost nothing in the academy that we shouldn't say is important. It all was. We had the start of the trans movement with, first you had gay studies, and then you had gay studies being not radical enough. And some of the early gay rights activists actually complained about a conference that had females going into male bathrooms. He said, wait a minute, I'm gay, but I'm also male. There's a distinction here between biological and females and males. And he's now been he's been brought out to sea by the tides of the new victim class, top dog victim, which is trans. But so that happened in the universities, and we'd noticed students with their 160 different categories of gender, and these various trans femme and asexual and all of this. And again, we sort of laughed at it. Ha 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 ha. They're so cute, these students, these snowflakes. And now you have whole states being boycotted because they want to say you actually have to be a biological female to compete in female track. So nothing stays put. And somehow, because these college graduates go in this transmission belt into the world at large, they carry the virus with them. That's what we should wear masks against. If we could have lockdowns, we should have lockdowns against college graduates and let the rest of us go on with our lives and try to recover the values that keep a civilization going.
Well, a number of people that I've spoken with recently are arguing, it's much better not to go to university to educate yourself right now.
Yeah, I would reach that conclusion with sorrow, with reluctance, because I thought for a while, I could think of nothing greater than being a college professor. That's what I aspired to be. Teach comparative literature, teach French literature, German, Italian. And I think that's the greatest calling, is to pass on these works. When we stop reading them, they die. That's on us. We have an obligation to keep Andrew Marvell alive, to keep John Donne alive, to keep Jonathan Swift and Alexander Pope alive. When we stop reading them, they die. We're committing, a genocide of great geniuses. But at this point, it is very hard to get a sound scholarly education and not get your whole way of thinking impaled by the bureaucracy and by left-wing faculty. So, what we need is conservative benefactors to figure out how to crack the difficult nut of trying to create a new institution that has sufficient prestige attached to it, that these social status climbing, prestige hungered parents will send their child there and will have enough bragging rights at their cocktail parties that they can compete with kids, parents with kids in the Ivy Leagues or other name brand universities. Parents don't care so much what their kids learn, but they want the IQ stamp on the forehead that the known universities provide.